All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So this week we're doing something a little bit different. In the spirit of NASCAR Throwback Weekend coming up, I wanted to do a little something about discussing Throwback Weekend, but more specifically, the cars we'll see on the track. So I wanted to bring in someone who knew a little bit about that. And that is why my guest Shawn Magee is joining me. He was the designer of the 2019 Cup Series Paint Scheme of the Year, as well as some pretty awesome throwback schemes. So, Shawn, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on again.
That's awesome. Yeah, whenever I was thinking about this, you were the first person that came to mind because I was like, you've had the crunch scheme. I'm trying to think of the other. There's another one that came to mind. The throwback. I think you did with is it Rick Ware or
hmm
I forget? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was with Rick Ware Racing. We did. It wasn't necessarily for Darlington, but it was a more of a tribute to John Ray and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
his truck that runs around with the giant flag before every Talladega race. So that was pretty cool to see, especially with him passing this year.
Hmm.
To run that in honor of him and the guys that drive that truck was pretty cool to see.
That's awesome. Now, I was doing some research for this, and I don't think that Corey or GoFast has released their throwback for this year, but I assume you're working on that, or
I'm not. It's the way that with recent deals that have happened this year, the team have restructured basically how things operate there.
Mhm.
So I will not be working on that paint scheme this year, unfortunately. So it's kind of a bummer, but I am working on a few other paint schemes for
Mhm.
MBM, and they haven't been released yet. But so I can't really say what they are. But yeah, we are working with the cup throwback, and then some of the Xfinities.
That's awesome. I feel like a lot of times the it's the smaller teams that really surprise you with something because it's you don't know where they're coming from, or with like a William Byron, you kind of understand like, okay, well, we know what Hendrick likes to do, we know the kind of people he likes, but then you don't know what Joey Gase is cooking up over there or whatever. So I think I speak for a lot of the NASCAR audience when we're excited to see what the NBM and all shows up with a couple of weeks from now at Darlington. Um, but I guess so. Jumping into it, like over the years, I've heard some people say that NASCAR has a criteria for the throwbacks. Like every year, their throwbacks have to be within a decade or whatever. But it seems like every year it's all over the place. You got cars that are maybe 5 years old, but you got cars that are 50 years old. As a designer, are there certain guidelines you have to follow?
Well, I mean, as of late, the rules of the throwback weekend have tightened up, where you're going in eras, or you have some sort of theme where back in the day it was just throwback to whatever.
Yeah.
So the rules themselves have tightened up, but when it comes to how you approach the paint scheme for a throwback, it's really how close do you want to try to get it. That's always been. I think that's most designers' goals when they do a throwback, is to try to get it looking as close to the original car and paint scheme as possible.
Hmm.
Um, it's a unique challenge that you don't get throughout the year, because most designers aren't copying paint schemes and trying to mirror and duplicate things exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a different challenge, but it's fun. I've always enjoyed it. I think that there's less design pressure to do it that way. At least for me, I find a lot of enjoyment in doing that. Like with the crunch car, or the 32 Corvette parts car, getting as close as possible to the original Dale Jarrett crunch car was a fun challenge, even down to the number set.
Hmm.
And that's to answer your question. One of the rules, I guess I'm following the rules of Corey LaJoie. That was one of his main sticking points, was has to be the same number.
Hmm.
Whatever throwback we do, it can't be a different number. That drives him nuts. So if you're going to do a throwback for Corey, it's got to be the same number. So that kind of limits you down to your choices, and you kind of go and kind of scour the internet and try to find out, all right, what other 32s in that area can I do,
Hmm.
and just kind of pitch them out there and see which one he likes the best, and then it says, yeah, let's do this one. And then you kind of focus in on it, or let's see concepts for these 3 options here that
Mm-hmm.
meet the driver and not all drivers are like that. Just I assume that a lot of drivers would prefer to run the same number,
Yeah.
but some don't, and that's okay with them, but not with Corey. He has to have the number. And I can appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping it authentic and as close to the original as possible, even down to the same number.
Okay, so it's not like you get because I know a lot of times NASCAR likes to pick that decade for maybe the tickets or maybe on track or at the track. But like as a designer, it's not like you're being told, okay, you have to be from 92 to 2002. You can still choose like a year, or does it still have to be a certain criteria of either Hall of Fame or this decade or?
Well, I think, like I said before, recently they set guidelines and they like you to follow those.
Mhm.
I know that there have been teams that have just kind of went rogue and just did a random, just
Yeah.
a random paint scheme. No one's going to really say, no, we're not going to allow you to race now because you
Okay.
did a paint scheme from a different era. But, when it comes down to really judging the paint schemes and taking that into account, then, they're really not going to include a paint scheme that's not in the same judging criteria, I guess,
Yeah.
is the
Okay.
best way.
Secondly, as a designer, how involved are you in the throwback? Do teams and sponsors already have their mind made up? Or do you try to half pairings where you say, if there was someone like a Corey LaJoy, you'd say, all right, here's the 32 cars, or okay, here's some really cool paint schemes that would work well with that sponsor's colors, or
Yeah, again, it just depends on the sponsor. The sponsor really is the end all when it comes to the paint scheme, especially throwback weekends. Some sponsors are like, hey, just pick some and show us some options. And other sponsors are like, we have a really good relationship with this driver, or we really want to throw back to this driver because it means a lot to us. They might have some sort of special connection that they want to use that particular paint scheme and really focus in on that. So like for the Corvette parts car, we identified a few different drivers and did a few different concept pitches, like really quick side views. And then, the folks over at Corvette parts, they selected, one that they liked and then, showed them to Corey, and Corey's like, yeah, definitely this one. And so they kind of came to a mutual agreement with the Dale Jarrett Crunch car and decided that was the one they wanted to run. Plus Corey's able to get, to wear the original Dale Jarrett fire suit for the pre-race interviews and all that kind of stuff that the folks over at Keen Parts were able to get their hands on. And luckily it fit Corey. So it was kind of a unique, things for him to sit up in the booth with Dale Jarrett and, Dale sitting there looking at Corey in his old fire suit. And, those are the type of elements that really tie the whole throwback weekend together.
Yeah, that as a fan, I love whenever someone jumps right into they're doing a Kyle Petty, so now they're going to have the mustache, or whatever. It's cool when you
Yeah.
have everything instead of just, okay, everything's the same. We just paint the car a different color. And I know some teams don't have the budget for it, but it doesn't take that much of a budget to, I guess, grow a mustache or whatever.
I don't know. The petty mustaches are hard to live up to. I mean, I don't know if I can do it. But.
So moving on, in your opinion, what makes a throwback scheme good? Because every year Dale Jr. has, 30 minutes on his podcast where he goes through and says, this one's good, this one's bad. I guess as a designer, as a race fan, what makes, when you look at a throwback scheme, what do you look for and what's your checklist of this is a good throwback?
Yeah, a good throwback to me, again, looks almost identical. When you set the throwback that you design next to the original car, if you can squint and they look almost like the same car, then that's a good job. So the key to that is having a brand that you're able to manipulate. And that kind of goes in the design world, that kind of, it's like petting the cat backwards. It's just one of those things you don't do, and it's just unnatural to take a brand and just totally just bastardize any sort of brand standards that you have set for that brand and morph it into something else that looks like another brand. It's just, from a marketing standpoint, it's just it makes no sense. But for Throwback Weekend, all that goes out the window. And a good example of that would be the '02 or the 00 car from last year,
Mm.
where they ran the Sterling Martin
Yeah.
Marlin throwback to Coors Light. My buddy Ryan did that one. He did a great job with it. It looked phenomenal on track. Even down to the styling of the letters looked just like Coors and Light. And it was just really, really well done. And to me, those types of details are really what makes the paint scheme. Down to the colors were right. The detail between the two logos was phenomenal. The mountains were in there. It was just a really, really nice paint scheme. And everybody, as soon as you look at it, you knew, hey, that's a Coors Light car.
Yeah.
So that tells you right there that was a successful paint scheme.
Mm-hmm. So I guess building off of that, what makes a throwback scheme a bad scheme? I'm sure as a designer, there's schemes that you've looked at and thought, I don't like that. I don't like seeing that on the track or whatever. What's kind of the checklist of the do nots when doing a throwback?
Well, we had a few good examples of subpar throwback options even this year. Starting out with Joey Logano's 22 car.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's trying to throw back to the Bobby Allison car, and I get it with the star and the paint scheme, but it's the numbers. And then I know it's a Penske deal where they don't change the numbers usually, or the font or anything like that. But that's just, it didn't, I mean, you got it kind of, but it was like it was half there.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't manipulate the Shell brand, due to strict brand standards. So there's no way that a big corporation like Shell is going to allow them to manipulate that. And so it wasn't styled like the old Miller brand. And it was missing something.
Mm-hmm.
You got it, you looked at it, you're like, okay, I could see, the iconic, star coming off the back. Fender, it's almost there. It just wasn't. I know it got a lot of pushback on social for just being, just halfway done. Really didn't do a lot for fans. They want to see that all out, as close as you can get it. I think another thing is that fans get used to seeing certain paint schemes, and they're like, okay, well, here's another paint scheme in.
Mm-hmm.
In this, or, like some of these paint schemes are redone from year to year, and fans get kind of tired of seeing it. It could be really well done, but if they've already seen it, especially the year before, that they're going to get tired of seeing it. So I always try to avoid recommending those paint schemes, just for the interaction or the feedback you're going to get from the general public on, they've already seen it. Try to do something different.
Mm-hmm. What's your opinions when you look at like Jimmy Johnson's scheme that came out, when you have someone that they're combining two schemes, but as a fan, I feel like at least you captured the side, there's all the detail of seniors. As a designer, do you think that can work, or it really is never going to truly work when you're trying to smash two completely different designs together?
Yeah, that was really interesting. I didn't know how I felt at first when I looked at it, because you knew right away that it was the three, and it was a Richard Petty car mashed together, just because of the two elements, were very iconic together, combined with, with Jimmy Johnson. But the more I thought about it, I was like, I wonder if this is going to be a trend moving forward, because you can only do so many throwbacks year after year, and before you've done them all, basically, all the notable ones, and is this going to be the trend that they're going to start going towards? It was like half, one driver, half another driver. I had a conversation with some designer buddies this past week with the same conversation. Like, is this going to be the trend? It might be. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely interesting, and it's grown on me over time. At first, I just didn't know how I felt about it, but the more I looked at it, I'm like, this is actually kind of cool. How these two go together, and not all the paint schemes are going to work like that. They might not go together, or kind of fight each other, and it might not work. So I don't know. That's something we'll have to see in future throwbacks.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was something with my dad. As soon as he saw it, he's a diehard Earnhardt fan. He was like, well, this looks like crap. But then for me, I was like, was like, it looks weird. I was like, it looks weird. But when I started noticing all of the detail, I'm like, but that's where you win me over. Cause it's not just, all right, throw some black and silver and blue. And, I guess it's the red or the orange or whatever with the petty.
The STP colors.
Yeah. And, but I was like, all of the details, that's what wins me over, is because it's, it's adjusted for it and all.
Yeah, and when you go with something that like those two paint schemes are very, very recognizable. And if you're gonna do it, you have to make sure it's right.
Mhm.
Down to the colors, and they did. I mean, it looked great. Once we see the fully wrapped car, I'm sure that that they're gonna do a great job wrapping
Yeah.
that car. Yeah, I think Junior actually got involved with that, so he's gonna make sure that every detail is exact and really pay attention to his feedback.
Mhm.
And and that's something that with some of the smaller teams don't have the feedback of some of these great NASCAR icons like
Yeah.
Dale Jr. They're just you're saying, well, it would be cool to do this, let's do a wrap and put it on
Mhm.
there and see how it goes. So they're the big organizations are have the time and the resources, mainly is the
Yeah.
big thing, to put into making these throwbacks really, really authentic.
Mhm. So I know it wasn't on the list, but I guess kind of going down the path of the good or bad or whatever. I know one thing that consistently comes up that Junior's talked about he hates, and I think some fans really get on the fence about, is whenever someone just takes, instead of a paint scheme, it's more of a throwback to the sponsor. So like I think it was last year, Hendrick had this old like Caterpillar. It was kind of thrown back to one of their old tractors or whatever. And a couple of years ago, I think Johnson just did. It was kind of a throwback to Lowe's instead of a particular. Um, is that like a thing too, where you sit there and say that's bad, or as a designer you think, well, that's still cool because, like you said, there's only so many paint schemes, so eventually you do need to get creative and maybe throw back to a sponsor.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I've never came up against that problem, just because I'm not working with a Lowe's or a retail presence or
Mm,
a big corporation that people know, hey, this is their old logo and they can recognize that. I think that is something that's if you're going to go that route, you almost have
mm,
to have the right sponsor that fans are going to recognize. Hey, that's an old Lowe's logo, or the Home Depot logo really hasn't changed that much since since it
yeah,
started. So, I don't know how. I guess they did Tony Stewart's old throwback there, but that still counts because it was a driver throwback. But
yeah,
you almost have to have that recognizable brand in order for them to pull that off.
hmm,
So if you have a new brand that people don't know what it is, then they're not going to know that that's an old logo to throw back to. But yeah, I don't I don't really have an opinion either way. If it looks
hmm,
like it's vintage and you can recognize and you've done a good job putting detail into it, as a designer, I think that I would appreciate that. Like Jimmy's Lowe's throwback that he did was really nice.
yeah,
The one with the light blue and the white wheels on it, it looked really cool.
hmm,
I thought they did a good job making that look vintage. It had a vintage look. It didn't really throw back to anything. It was just kind of their old style look for
yeah.
the old Lowe's corporate brand.
Yeah. I guess finally, is there a car or truck this year, since we have the trucks at Darlington, that you believe is most deserving of a throwback? Because every year people bring up Mike Skinner's 31 Lowe's car, and I feel like there's also a handful of other ones that they're like, this one deserves a throwback. So for you, as a fan, or I guess even as a designer, you look at it and you think, man, I would love to try to put a current car with that look or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. When you asked me that question earlier, I was like, well, that's a really good question. I hadn't really thought about that too much, but I've always been a big Darrell Waltrip fan. I just,
Mhm.
I like him as a driver. I liked him as an announcer. And so I always thought it'd be cool to throw back to his old 11 truck that he ran in the Craftsman truck
Yeah.
series with flames on the side. And you don't see that too often. You don't really dive into the truck series that often
Mhm.
for throwbacks. A lot of times in the truck series, just because of the budget constraints to begin with in the truck series, being the entry level into
Mhm.
the top three tiers of NASCAR there. Some of these guys are just lucky to even get to the track, have
Yeah.
enough gas money to get there, let alone to dedicate a full paint scheme that's going to be thrown back. But, um, you know, running that 11 truck, I think would be really cool to see. But again, if you're going by Corey LaJoy rules, that it'd have to be the right number. So I think he ran it in 17 and 11, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of those two. So you'd have to have those numbers in the truck series.
Yeah, as soon as they announced the truck series, that's what I got most excited about, because I know, like, for me growing up, I love Napa, so I love what they did with Hornaday. Growing up, we were a huge Chevrolet fan, so like Dennis Setzer's old it was like the Chevrolet backed one from, like, I think it was like '03 to maybe '06 or so, but it was like the brown, black, and silver number 46. As soon as I saw that, I was like, man, I hope one of the GMS trucks shows up with that on there. But I guess
It's
we'll
an
find out.
untapped. That truck series basically is an untapped throwback market there. So I mean, you can get some really cool paint schemes going on if you have the budget. GMS definitely has the budget to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They race like 43 trucks in a race anyway. So.
That's very true. Well, Shawn, thanks for giving us some of your opinions on the throwbacks in general. If there's anything you would like to go ahead and throw out for us to check out, I know was there a new podcast you've been working on?
Yeah. I was asked to be a contributor on a podcast, the Designer Roundtable. Michael Carey got a few designers in the industry together, and we just kind of talk about different things in the sport from a design standpoint. He felt that was kind of a missing area that people really are interested in, but you don't hear too much behind the scenes. As a designer, you don't really get a lot of credit on through the television or anything like that. Not that we need it, but people just don't know about. They don't know about us. We're just kind of the man behind the curtain in most cases, and it's good that we're getting on there, and we're going to be doing next week. We're going to be doing a segment where people can send messages in and chats to ask questions that we'll address in the roundtable setting, and just kind of hash through those questions. And a lot of people have a lot of different questions about what goes on behind the scenes, and how paint schemes end up the way they do, what the processes are. There's just a lot of interest in those particular questions.
That's really cool. I've really enjoyed what y'all have been doing over there. And it's cool too, because even on this, I've had the opportunity to speak to, a couple legends in the sport, some current drivers. But honestly, the two episodes that come up is you and then Dick Claplow from GMS, where people say, well, yeah, I knew what the drivers go through, or I know what this person did, but they're like, I never thought about them having to, in your case, design a trophy, or, in y'all's case is designing cars. And it was really cool to get the feedback where, yeah, like it's, you hear a lot about drivers, but it's the designs that's, that's you're the people behind the iconic paint schemes that we look at on the track. So it's been pretty cool to get feedback and be like, I'm enjoying that people enjoy the episodes that I love, and learning about that.
Yeah, and Dick's a great guy too. I'm working with him, this year with some projects with Brett Moffitt and our motorsports with Freight Auction. So, we're in constant communication. We have a few things brewing for a couple races this coming up here. So, but yeah, he's been great. I try to not make his life, complicated by sending over, messy designs to him to try to get printed out. But yeah, he's been great, and he manages so much stuff over there that, like I said before, with GMS and all their trucks that they run on every single week. And he's been doing a great job too with Nick, because this is a throwback. He's been doing a lot of Jimmy Johnson throwbacks with Brett Moffitt, and our motorsports. They just ran one. It was on the pole.
Yeah.
This past Xfinity race at Dover. It's cool to see. So, but yeah, Dick's doing a great job over there, and he's definitely been a good resource to have. He's one of those guys that'll help you out if he can. So, I really appreciate him.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Shawn.
Yeah, not a problem. It was fun. We'll have to do this again sometime.